Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to a special collective lens presented by Pieces Loud and Imagine This Women's International Film Festival. Collective Lens is Pieces Loud's impact training program for filmmakers, and I'm so excited to share our impact roadmap with the Imagine community today. My name is Florencia Varela. I'm the program lead for learning and filmmaker outreach at Pieces Loud. My pronouns are she, her, Asia. My visual description is I am a white Latina with long brown hair. I have hazel eyes. I'm wearing a very dark blue sweater, and I am sitting in front of a wall with, you can see the bottom part of a frame, and I have a window behind me as well. Today we're going to be covering the 101 of impact, as in the what, the why, and the how. What is impact? Why we do it, and how you can start envisioning a plan for an impact campaign for your film. In case you are not familiar with Pieces Loud, just a little bit of information about us. We are a nonprofit organization that harnesses the power of storytelling for social justice. And we do this primarily through film impact work and impact campaigns for documentaries. In the past, we've done impact campaigns for films such as To the End, The Ants and the Grasshopper, On the Divide, Knock Down the House, Women War and Peace 1 and 2, The Bleeding Edge, and The Armor of Light, among other titles. We use documentaries really as a tool to advance social justice movements. And we also prioritize filmmakers who are underrepresented and or under-recognized in the industry, including but not limited to people who identify as BIPOC, LGBTQIA, disabled, immigrant, or undocumented. Just a little bit of a note on tech for today. We are live stream on YouTube right now. Thank you to Patrice, who's handling all the tech side. You are welcome to ask questions via the chat feature today. They'll be funneled over my way, and I'll check it once in a while. And I just wanted to also know that usually when we do a collective lens, we are in a room with folks, whether it's like a virtual room or an in-person room. And today will be more of a presentation model with me talking quite a bit. But still, I wanted to name that collective lens really comes from a position of collective learning and collaboratively learning together. Teaching with rather than to or at. And that really everything that I'm going to talk about, everything we know about impact comes and exists because we've worked with filmmakers and protagonists on impact campaigns. So I really hope that we can always continue learning together and expanding our notion of impact and how we can experience it. So really excited to be here in community with the Imagine This Women's International Film Festival. Love all the filmmakers who are featured in the festival. Really hope that there's a nice crowd here today. And for anyone that is joining, that means that you've said yes to impact in any kind of capacity. And really curiosity is our first step in this process, because impact and the work of impact and the work of impact campaigns starts with curiosity, with hope, and with possibility. I'm going to now start sharing my screen. I do have a presentation, so just give me a moment while I sort this out. And here we go. So as I said, we're going to be covering the what is impact, the impact values is in the why we do this work and how it's guided, and our impact strategy roadmap, which is the how we actually put together an impact campaign plan. So starting from that position of being impact curious that I named before, it's really important to first zoom out and consider why we're here to begin with. Why are we talking about impact? Why are we making films? Why do stories matter? And they matter because stories in essence have so much power. And I'm talking about the stories that we carry, the stories we tell each other, the stories your films carry. Since the beginning, really, humans have been telling stories to help understand the world and ourselves and each other. Also, stories can synchronize. And when we talk about synchronize, I'm talking about synchronizing storytellers and their audiences, as well as helping also more broadly synchronize communities. And lastly, stories have this very unique power that can help dismantle harmful narratives and stereotypes, and at the same time, represent the authentic and complex human experience and offer an imaginative vision for the future. All to say that stories can deconstruct and build at the same time. A metaphor that I really love, that we share quite a bit in the impact space, and it was coined by practitioners Jeff Chang, Liz Mann, and Aaron Potts, is that we can really think about stories as stars. And when we think of it that way, when you think about stories then being collected, they start forming a constellation. These constellations are narratives. And all of this happens in the larger galaxy of culture. So when you have a small set of stories, they start organizing together and combining, and all of a sudden you're creating a narrative. And if you have enough narrative shifting, then you're going to start changing culture. So this is how we enter the conversation. We have the power of stories as our entry point. We're going to name it, and then we're going to harness it. And from there, we're going to move on to what is impact. So we get approached quite a bit with this question. Like, filmmakers want to ask us, what is impact? What is the difference between outreach and engagement? What is the difference between publicity and impact, marketing and impact? And also, in essence, like, what is an impact campaign? When we're in conversation with filmmakers, usually we ask them what impact means to them. And some of the words that will come up are call to action, change, conversation, ripple effects, community, movements, and eventually the word stories and story is going to come up. At Pieces Loud, we define impact as the influence of a film for transformative change. Now, I offer this definition, but also acknowledge that this is not limited to just an impact campaign. There's an opportunity to make change and enact impact every step of a filmmaking process. So in essence, impact can be the work, like the actual what we're striving to do, but also can be how we're approaching that work. I want to lift up two key terms in this definition. The first is influence, because when we talk about influence, we're talking about the story and the film being a tool. Fundamentally, people are the ones that make change, and films are tools that are going to support them make that change. And then the other key term that I want to lift up in this definition that Pieces Loud has put together is transformative. Because when we're talking about change, Pieces Loud really centers this idea of a change that is long-term, a change that is sustainable and systemic. In essence, a change that will stand the test of time. There can be a lot of different kinds of changes that happen through an impact campaign, but this is really the kind of change where Pieces Loud is most invested. We have put together an impact glossary, and we're going to be sharing it as part of our Collective Lens digital library with everyone who joins us today. And we put it together because it really helps create shared language, and it represents our organizational values. I am going to offer some key terms now, because these are terms that really come up often when we're talking about impact campaigns. First is an impact campaign. So keeping in mind that impact is the influence of a film for transformative change, an impact campaign is then going to be a set of strategic activities. And this can include care work, capacity building, educational outreach, resources, community screenings, and all these activities are meant to maximize a film's potential for social change. An important term is also protagonist. When I speak about a protagonist, I am speaking about a person who is represented in a documentary film. Now, historically, a term that's often used is subject, but unfortunately, the word subject really attributes a passive nature without agency. And at Pieces Loud, we really like to use the word protagonist more, or participant, since it speaks to a person's full agency when represented in a documentary film. Then we have publicity. Now, publicity is the public awareness of a film. This can include social media around it. This can include media coverage. This can include word of mouth. And for example, if your film is featured in a magazine, that is a function of publicity. Versus marketing. Marketing are activities undertaken to promote a film. And that can include social media ads, guerrilla marketing, advertising, and sponsorship. So for example, if you were sponsoring an e-blast with a banner ad about your film, that's marketing versus publicity. Now, in terms of impact, it's important to note that very often publicity and impact are pitted, well, publicity and marketing are pitted against impact. And that really doesn't have to be the case. You can approach publicity and marketing with an impact lens, and you can even braid goals. For example, if you're doing an impact campaign where you're striving to reach a certain region or a certain cities, you could braid whatever publicity events you're doing or marketing efforts into those regions. So you can start braiding those goals a little bit. Further, publicity and marketing can be tactics as part of your impact campaign. We're going to talk about tactics in a little bit. but all to say publicity and marketing should not be used as interchangeable terms with an impact campaign. We then have distribution. Distribution is really the process of making a film available to audiences. And this covers all the different kinds of distribution. This covers theatrical, digital and streaming, grassroots, community, non-theatrical, educational, and even festivals. And there's well beyond more than that, but these are just a couple of examples. And then outreach, or outreach for impact, better yet. This is what we call the process of identifying and contacting a target audience based on a specific impact campaign goal. Then there's engagement then, which comes after outreach, which is the process of creating authentic relationships and activities between an impact campaign and its target audiences based on a specific impact campaign goal. And last but not least is general audience, which is a super important term to go over because it's 100% a trick question. Pieces Loud fundamentally does not believe that there is such a thing as a general audience in an impact campaign. There's a wonderful practitioner in the impact space. Her name is Erin Sorensen, and she has said that sometimes it can be advantageous to have a film seen by many people, but it's not always recommended to achieve or needed to achieve an impact campaign goal. So in essence, you don't need everyone to see your film for an impact campaign. You need the right people. I keep checking the chat. If there are questions, please make sure they'll make their way to me. So now that we've covered what impact is, this influence of the film from transformative change and some key terms around it, it's important to then move on to why. Now, when we talk about why impact and why we do impact work, it really comes down to a system of values. Because we're distinguishing marketing and publicity versus impact, because we are talking about change that is sustainable and transformative, and because we're trying to always center those who are most affected, values have to be integrated into the impact equation. As a nonprofit, Pieces Loud does have organizational values. We embrace intersectional feminism, and our values are rooted in care. Whenever I talk to filmmakers, and right now as well, I really encourage folks to just reflect on what your values are. Why do you do this work? Why are you making this film? Why does it matter? Why is it important to you? And all those questions you can integrate as a lens for your impact campaign, and as well as for your production even. There's this false narrative around how we operate at work or in our art, and it's separate from us. And really, it doesn't have to be a double life. Our values should be holistic and comprehensive of both. So speaking along the lines of Pieces Loud's values being rooted in care, I want to share a quote. This is really how we talk about care, and this definition comes from the CARE Manifesto, which was published in 2020 by Verso Books. And it says that care is our individual and common ability to provide the political, social, and emotional conditions that allow the vast majority of people and living creatures on this planet to thrive, along with the planet itself. I am a sucker for this quote. I love it so much. I share it with filmmakers, I share it with friends, I share it with family. I would share it with my 5-year-old if he would let me, because it's fundamentally, we agree so much with it. This idea that we really should be interdependent. We should be accountable to each other, and we should be responsible for each other. And all of this that I'm saying, and this very definition of care, can be manifested in films, and can be manifested in what stories we tell, how we tell them, and how we position them in solidarity with others. So with that in mind, I'm going to take the opportunity and share Pieces Loud 3's values for impact campaigns. The first one is equity. Because equitable production processes can really positively affect the film itself, as well as the filmmaking industry at large in really transformative ways. Our second value is safety. Because the livelihood, the safety, and security of those centered in a story, and this includes protagonists, their communities, and the very film team itself, have to be prioritized in the production, distribution, and impact campaign processes. So by safety, I should say that I include physical, emotional, mental, legal, and digital safety. And I also a disclaimer that when we talk about safety, it's very dependent on what the film is, what it's doing, and also the context. So just to keep that in mind. The last value I want to offer from Pieces Loud is representation. And by this, we mean having people authentically portrayed on screen, which can include people telling their own stories and or having decision-making power in the filmmaking and impact production process. Representation in front and behind camera lens can strengthen a film's impact and can help bolster social justice efforts. So as you start thinking about your impact campaign, it's really an opportunity to bring yourself into it. Your values, how you move in the world, how you show up, how you treat others, how you treat your friends, your families, your crew, your protagonists, all of that can be manifested in your impact campaign. Before I move on, I did see a question here. They'd like to hear the difference between publicity and marketing as it applies to impact campaigns, and will it be shared? It will be shared. We're going to share our glossary after this event, along with the rest of our digital library. We have a lot of resources. But in essence, one is making the film known to audiences, and the other one is the activity to do it to propel that the visibility of it. There is this concept of shared media and earned media around it as well. And in terms of impact campaigns, the thing about impact campaigns is that it's focused really on a targeted right audience. And we're going to talk about that when we talk about the strategy roadmap, versus marketing and publicity usually are going after the most largest audiences. So impact is an opportunity to get more targeted and specific and strategic within those audiences. And those definitions are all noted in the glossary as well. And sorry, I'm looking at another question here that's coming in. How do you see the different potential for impact with fiction versus nonfiction films? That's an excellent question. I'm going to take a beat to engage with it, and then we're going to move on just because I don't want to run us out of time. But I love that filmmakers are thinking about impact and nonfiction, because the truth of the matter is that if we are defining impact as the influence of a film from transformative change, it does not narrow it just that to documentary. Documentary historically has carried impact and impact campaigns, but right now there is an opportunity in the field and space, and we're noticing how narrative films and fiction are also wanting to carry that impact and position those stories in solidarity with social justice movements. At the end of the day, I think it's very dependent on context, what the film is, what are the goals, and what is it trying, and what are the needs of the social movement? Because sometimes a narrative film maybe is exactly the right tool for a specific audience within a space versus a documentary. So I love that question. I really appreciate it. We're really hoping to work more with also narrative filmmakers in this space, and and unpacking that a bit more, because there's a lot of nuance in terms of how narrative and fiction films come into play in this equation. As I go back to our values, I just wanted to very quickly offer some examples of what Pieces Loud has done. So in terms of equity, safety, and representation, and I'm going to offer these examples carefully in that when you are working with care work, and when you are working with, I mean, some of it are ethical questions in the film industry, it's very wise to look at the fine prints in funding contracts, distribution contracts, to make sure that you're within guardrails. But a couple of examples of what Pieces Loud has done before is, for example, we secured mental health care support for protagonists of a film. We've compensated partners for participating in impact campaigns. We recognize that whenever we work with partners on impact campaigns, they're actually doing labor just by integrating the film, just by talking to us. But then it's definitely by integrating the film into their own infrastructure and programs. So we want to make sure they're compensated for that labor. We've also secured legal support for protagonists. And another example is we once had an event that required security, but we really did not want formal police presence. And instead, we worked with a partner, the ACLU, who had legal observers on site for that event instead. So I offer that as examples, non-prescriptive. It's really, we're talking about values, we're talking about how to implement them. And it's gray area, and this is more of an invitation to consider these things. I do want to offer just one more thing in terms of values and care with impact campaigns and even production. And because I talk to filmmakers quite a bit about this, and it's the idea of pace. You know, the film industry is pretty notorious by the pace it carries, and it's very hectic and it's very stressful and it has all this urgency around it. And I always check in with filmmakers to see, you know, are you slowing down? Are you taking care of yourself? Are you resting? Because just slowing down is a huge act of care. And if you can extend that to yourself intentionally, to your protagonist, to your partners in a campaign, to your film crew on set, you know, sometimes things will be urgent and we cannot control some things, but whenever we can control it, that shift in pace can carry so much care. So I really just encourage, you know, filmmakers to consider that for themselves. Checking the chat. And in the meantime, I'm going to move us to the last question, which actually takes up the most time. So we're doing okay. You know, we talked about what in terms of what is impact. We talked about why, as in our values, like why are the values that guide this work? And finally, I'm moving us towards our impact roadmap, which is the how. And this is Pieces Loud's impact campaign strategy development process. Something important that I want to note is that this is our process. This is a process. It's not the process. And I really, you know, I would love for filmmakers to take pieces of it or all of it, but it's really whatever works best for your plan. I think the main takeaway that I would want someone to walk away with is that if you're thinking about embarking on impact work and specifically an impact campaign, that you should have a plan for designing that strategy and a plan for implementation. And also to remember that you are the expert of your film. You're the expert of your process, and you're the expert of your impact campaign. So wherever this roadmap is helpful to you, I am excited and energized by, but by no means is it a prescriptive endeavor. But very quickly first, I have two very quick what about questions. Usually when we're talking about an impact campaign with filmmakers, there's two but what about moments. The first one is, but what about who? Who's going to do this work? And by who's going to do this work, I mean, who's the person that's going to design your impact campaign? Who is the person that's going to conduct it and implement? And the answer is that there's no straight answer. There's different options though. You can hire an impact producer, an impact team, or an impact organization. For example, Pieces Loud, we worked on impact campaigns. There's no shortage of incredible impact producers out there. There is a fantastic directory, GIPA, the Global Impact Producers Alliance online. And you can search by region, by interest, by issue area. So no shortage of incredible impact folks doing this work. You can also work with actual folks working in movements. So organizers sometimes are really well positioned to help with this work. And finally, you can also do this yourself. Now, if you're going to do it yourself, and also for all the other options I mentioned, you just want to keep in mind certain variables. What are the goals of the campaign? What is the capacity? And by capacity, I mean time, and I also mean mental and emotional capacity. Your budget, that's a huge variable. And also your values. Who should be represented on this impact team and why? The second question that I want to offer is, but what about when? When does impact start? So Pieces Loud, staunch believer in that impact starts when the filmmaking process begins. So we're talking in development. The minute we're in development, the minute we're thinking about doing a film, that's when we're thinking already about impact. What is the role of this film in the world? That said, a really nice beat in the production process is post-production. Because you still have the opportunity to edit, you still have the opportunity to bring protagonists or other stakeholders into the conversation. That is a really nice moment to start developing an impact campaign strategy. So in terms of Pieces Loud's roadmap, our process has three main steps. The first is an internal discovery process, which are going to be guiding questions about your film. The second is an external discovery process, which is an exploratory process about your film. And the last are the impact building blocks, which are components of your film's impact campaign. This is going to include your vision and goal, your strategy, your audiences, your tactics, and your outcomes. So these are the 3 steps that our team actually does with every film, and we recommend that filmmakers also engage in. So this first step, the internal discovery process, it's really a time for reflection. It's a series of guiding questions that will help you analyze your film from within. So when I say this, I mean, at no point should you be doing like research for this step in the process. These are questions that are going to help you identify your general approach to impact, and they're going to help you identify everything you still might have to figure out. The internal discovery process hopefully will allow you to confirm what you know, what you don't know, and it's going to allow you to confirm a working theory for your impact campaign. Where do you think this campaign might go? So what does this look like? Usually our team, literally, it's a Google Doc. We put one together with all the questions and our team answers it. And then we have another version that the film team and whoever has decision-making power for the impact campaign on that side will do one. Sometimes it's the directors and producers, impact producers, protagonists can also participate. It can really be a collaborative process. So what we do is we look at ours, we look at the other one, and we look at where the overlap is. In essence, what you're doing is you're just organizing your thoughts. And because you're organizing thoughts, we like to do this with buckets of questions. Our buckets are the people, the problem, the overview, the vision, and then a step back. When we're talking about people, really the first question that we're asking as part of this process is who is represented in the film? What are their strengths? What are their goals? What are their dreams? How are they affected by an issue that's represented in the film? Have they organized around said issue? And what does care mean to them? From there, because we always start with people, we move to problem. And my problem is a pretty straightforward question, is what is the problem or issue that is affecting people in this film? Usually if we're talking about documentaries with social justice, with the social justice lens, they are looking at certain issue areas. So we're zooming in and figuring out, all right, what is the problem that this film is trying to unpack? Also, what is the social wrong that the campaign is looking to change? What is the dominant narrative around this problem? And what could an alternative narrative look like? Then we move on to overview. When we talk about overview, we're looking at what are the strengths and challenges related to the film and issue. And we're talking about strengths and challenges that a filmmaker might have with this film specifically. What resources are you bringing? And by resources, I don't mean just money. I mean introductions, infrastructure, space, anything you can think of, anything that you're bringing to the process, you want to start taking inventory of. And also another thing important in overview are questions around context. What context is the film entering into? What context are protagonists entering into? And also, what is the current events landscape? What's happening in the news? When this film gets released and when this impact campaign starts, what is it going to be interacting with? Then there's vision. Vision is sort of like the most fun part of the process, because you get to think real big. And the main question here is, what am I in the best position to provide the world with my film? How can an impact campaign center the protagonist and their vision as well? So, if you're going to change the world, what are you changing? And you can shoot really big here. And finally, there's a step back moment. I say step back pretty often in my work because it is important to always step back and make sure that you are navigating things with intentionality. So when we step back, we're going to use all the answers that you just did as part of your internal discovery process, whether you did it, your co-director did it, protagonist did it, whoever has decision-making power in this campaign did it. And you're going to start identifying a very tentative approach to your impact campaign. It's a working theory. For example, is your campaign going to be trying to change minds? Is it going to be building power? Is it trying to change policy? Is your campaign going to be a vehicle for healing, a vehicle for affirmation? These are all just examples. This is a time for you to start considering what your film is going to set out to do. And this is not the end all be all. This is just the first step of 3. Because after that, you're going to move on to the external discovery process. Whereas the internal discovery process was really coming from within for the filmmaker and anyone that's working on the film and impact campaign, the external discovery process is really a time to center the protagonist and the movements. It's going to be an analysis to center where the film and the impact campaign are going to live. Like, what is the ecosystem? The external discovery process is going to fill in some gaps from the internal process. It's going to help look outside of yourself and your film team, and it's going to help center everyone that's most affected by that issue represented in your film. And lastly and fundamentally, it's going to start orienting that working theory from the internal process in a direction of action and solidarity. An impact campaign strategy really needs a holistic approach. So this step really allows you to practice values of care by centering and investing in genuine relationships. So what does this process look like? It looks like conversations. You're going to be talking to folks that are in the film and their communities. You're going to be doing research and doing outreach to potential partners and allies in the space. And you're going to be doing research in issue areas and data. A lot of times, this is when a brain trust comes into play. This might be a term that folks know and are familiar with or have done before. A brain trust is really a meeting of stakeholders throughout a campaign. It can include protagonists, partners, allies, filmmakers, impact producers into a very big conversation around what is this film going to do. And they can be really productive, powerful forums. I will say that Pieces Loud like to do things a little bit differently. We have done brain trusts and we encourage to do them when it makes sense. We really like to approach it one-on-one whenever possible. It really helps us build trust and get to know everyone on a much more personal level, and to actively be in tune with their needs and goals. So we have three main recommendations for this part of the process. The first is to really reflect on your filmmaker-protagonist relationship, especially if you're in a documentary. A film can be about yourself or it can be about others. You might be collaborating and co-directing with a protagonist or not. But just reflecting on this, while reflection was a step in the first part of the process, we like to include a beat here. Reflecting on this is really going to determine all the external work that needs to happen. And also this might include acknowledging some dynamics of power that exist in the film and the film production process. The minute you have a film and the minute you're telling a story, it can be adding dynamics or it can be interrupting dynamics. So all of these questions are hopefully going to help navigate ways that are going to benefit those who are represented on screen and also mitigate harm as much as possible. The second consideration that I want to offer is actively listen and build genuine relationships. So you're going to talk to your protagonists, you're going to talk to their communities, you're going to talk to potential partners and allies, and you're going to actively listen. And what we mean to actively listen is you're going to listen to their goals, their dreams, their needs, and you're also going to listen to what they're not saying. Something that happens, I feel like, for everybody everywhere is like we show up to a conversation and we are already thinking about what we're going to say versus, being in a position of listening and waiting and being open. So this is a beat to really remind yourself you're going to go into the conversation only to listen and not bring the film in even. Even if your film is about yourself, it's really productive to have these expansive conversations because it can help also just expand the notion of what it might do. I want to offer how Pieces Loud does our partner calls. Yes, we mention the film when we do outreach, but the minute we're on the phone with a partner, we really stop talking about the film and we start asking questions about what their goals are, what their needs are, and from there offer the film as a tool. These conversations, what's really great on a tactical level is that it's going to help map allies and partners and screening hosts, which is really good. And finally, I want to mention research. And the core value of research is that we want to avoid assumptions when we're doing an impact campaign. You want to know who's in the ecosystem and who is already doing the work and who you should be seeking out to support. You also want to grow awareness. You want to grow your awareness of the context of the film, the context of the protagonist and those most affected. And you want to grow your awareness of relevant news context and historical background. So this is when research comes in. An impact campaign can't live in a vacuum. I'll offer that public data is an excellent resource. Like a few years ago, we were working on an impact campaign around medical device safety, and we had a really clear idea about who our target audience was going to be. And then we did research and realized our target audience had to be so much older than we thought. So we had to adjust all of our strategy to that. So again, you know what they say about making assumptions about you and me and whatnot, but the whole idea about research is that we want to avoid making those assumptions. So we had our first step of internal discovery process, our second step of external discovery process, which leads us to our impact building blocks, which is the very last step in the process. Pieces Loud uses 5 strategic building blocks. They're based off movement building frameworks. We have our vision and goal, our audience, our strategy, our tactics, and our outcomes. 2 really pieces of advice, and I say advice, but it's that advice I tell myself all the time, is that good strategies make good choices. They make solid choices. You're gonna have to say no to things. Even with unlimited budget, unlimited people, unlimited ideas, your campaign's not gonna be able to do everything. The more you say no to some things, the better position you're gonna be to succeed at the things you do say yes to. Also, good strategies ask why. They ask why all the time with rigor, and it's kind of relentless. But it's good because then you're moving with intentionality through your decision making. So starting at the very top with vision and goal. Vision is really like what change is needed. In your internal discovery process, we were talking about what is the problem that your film is centering, like what is this issue area? Vision is usually going to be the response to that. So, we're dealing with some pretty drastic weather here in New York. I hope everyone is safe today and was safe yesterday. But for example, keeping in mind extreme weather, maybe our vision is that there is no more extreme weather. Now, that you would be thinking very big here, huge. But then you have your goal. Your goal is going to move us a little bit more towards specificity because it's going to ask, what will your campaign, your impact campaign try to achieve within that vision? So it's really the film that moves us from that vision, from that really big dream of change to something much more specific of a goal. Your film is doing that. And your goal is going to be 3 key things. It's going to be grounded. And by grounded, I mean it's going to be grounded in the film. Your goal should be represented in the film always, otherwise you're going to run into some challenges. Your goal is going to be specific because at the end of the day, all the tactics as part of your campaigns, they're going to have to go back to your goal. And it should be achievable. And by that, I mean the number of goals and the goals themselves. Once you know your goal, you're going to be thinking about your target audience. Who are the specific people you need to reach to achieve that goal? Who has the power and influence to accomplish it? Now, I talk to filmmakers often, and a lot of things that I hear are like, everyone needs to watch this film. And my gut reaction is like, hey, you're absolutely right. Everyone should watch this film because I love films and I want to watch everything and everyone should watch everything. The truth of the matter is that even though a film is relevant probably to a lot of people, when it comes to your impact campaign, that's not true. It's going to be a lot more specific about who needs to watch it to achieve that specific campaign goal. And from there, we move over to strategy with our next building block. Our strategy is our plan of action or approach to reach that specific audience to achieve your impact campaign goal. It is a bridge between your goal and your tactics. Tactics comes next, you'll see. It is really buckets of work. It's going to hold specific activities. And for example, it can include the idea of education, provocation, base building, energizing a base, capacity building. These are things that we do, they're actions, but they're not very specific, as you can tell. So they're really buckets of work to approach and reach that audience to achieve your goal. And within strategy, live your tactics. Now, these are the specific actions and activities that you're going to do as part of your strategy. This is where screenings, creating content, digital campaigns, creating educational resources, creating educational guides, direct action, all that stuff lives in tactics. These are the specific activities and actions. Care work, for example, would be a tactic. If you're doing care work for your protagonist or for your partners, if you're securing legal support or mental health care, if you're compensating folks, those can also be tactics within your campaign, within a strategy. Something that I like to say here is that a screening is always a tactic, never a goal. We sometimes when we're talking to filmmakers, we hear, oh, I want to do a screening in DC. That's my goal. I want to do a screening on the Hill. And it's like, well, that would be really a tactic to achieve a much larger goal. So consider that a screening is always a tactic, never a goal. Which reminds me, as part of the digital library we'll share, we are sharing a distribution FAQ. It's our FAQ that we've created about how distribution and impact can intersect. So that'll be coming your way as well. A last note about tactics is to stay flexible with them because context changes. And sometimes the specific actions and activities we're going to do have to change because of that context. Your goals and your strategy are not going to change as much. Your tactics, most likely, yes. And then there's our last building block, which is outcomes. So when I talk about outcomes, I don't really mean actual results. I mean, how will you show that you met your goal? How do you know that you've reached your goal that you designed? What are your evaluation needs? And this is really, it has to be a part of your strategy because you want to know exactly how you are measuring towards that and also what it looks like to reach that goal that you already designed. When we talk about evaluation, there are two ways to approach it. Usually there's quantitative data and qualitative data. Quantitative is sort of sometimes the easier one to track because we're talking about numbers and reach. How many partners, how many screenings, where, how many audiences. Qualitative has a bit more nuance and texture to it. Usually what we recommend doing as part of that are maybe surveys or listening sessions or interviews with your protagonists and your partners and your screening hosts. And also something you can do is track a film's context. You know, you can set up Google alerts for keywords to see if there's anything happening in that regard. And then a very important question in terms of outcomes has to do with RAP. For the most part, you know, an impact campaign, for example, for Pieces Loud, an impact campaign is usually anywhere between 8 and 14 months. Usually impact campaigns don't go on forever. It's just not sustainable. With that in mind, we recommend that the minute you decide that you're going to do it, that you start thinking about how it's going to end. How is the work going to live on? How is the film still going to be available as a tool? What infrastructure needs to be created? And who do you need to be having conversations with? The last thing you want is to scramble at the very end. So as you consider outcomes, we're not going to do a lot of evaluation work right here in this room, but I do want to offer 3 quick hits from Pieces Loud. The first being to start early. As you confirm your strategy, you want to start thinking about what you got to track. What kind of data are you tracking and how? Sometimes that means getting baseline data. For example, if your partners or have a specific membership number of base, you want to know what those are, so then you don't have to ask them to look it up later on. You also want to create systems. How are you tracking these things? Are you going to need a spreadsheet? Do you have a CRM? Something that Pieces Loud does that I always recommend to people is having what we call a catch-all document. It's literally a Google Doc where you just copy and paste things as they come, just so you don't forget about them. You can always go back and see them, but that way you have somewhere to look them up. The second recommendation is an internal midpoint review. This is really just meant as a meeting that will not fall off the calendar, and it's an opportunity to course correct. This is where your tactics might change because you're having a meeting, you're looking at, oh, you know what? Actually, this tactic is not doing what it needs to do, or maybe the strategy needs to be fine-tuned in order to reach that audience. This is what this meeting is for. Also, this meeting may show you that you're being super successful at something. So maybe it's time to actually put more resources in that direction. So schedule it early, don't let it fall off the calendar, and know that course correction is okay. And the very last evaluation quick hit that I want to offer is to celebrate the victories. This work is hard. It's hard on many levels. It's hard tactically, it's hard on the funding side, it's hard emotionally. And there's going to be really incredible moments of impact, and you should really take the opportunity to celebrate those. The best way to get a CRM, I'm seeing the chat. Best way to get a CRM is tough. Most of these softwares are available for fee. I will say some have free trials. I know Airtable is a great CRM system and project management tool that is available for a free trial. So I would look into that. I will also say that I've done this work on a much more grassroots level, and I've worked off Excel spreadsheets. And if anyone ever wants to talk about how to set those up for yourself, please don't hesitate to get in touch because I love Excel sheets and I'm happy to support wherever I can in that capacity. So as we wrap up, because we looked at what was impact, why we do it, and the how. And within the how, we looked at our internal discovery process, our external discovery process, and our impact building blocks. I want to show you what it looks like all together, these impact blocks. We have our vision and goal at the very top. What change are you trying to achieve? We have our audience. Who holds power or is more affected or has the influence to achieve that goal? The strategy, how are you going to reach that audience? And then you have your tactics, your specific actions that you're going to be doing. And finally, your outcomes. How are you going to show success and how will this live on? And I hope this map helps offer a little bit of the vision of how we approach impact campaigns to strive for transformative change at Pieces Loud. And with that, we are reaching the very end, which is pretty crazy how much time flies. I will check the chat to see if there's questions because we have a few minutes. And in the meantime, I will say thank you so much. Thank you primarily to the Imagine This Women's International Film Festival because Patrice and Susie are incredible. They're baller, they're badass. Everyone should support it. Go see all the films they program. They have fostered such a tremendous festival, and the filmmakers in this year's festival are so incredible, especially the docs. Go check them out. I also want to thank everyone who joined us today and their openness to impact. And I do have 4 invitations. The first is to reach out directly. My email is listed right there. It's florencia@piecesloud.org. I love meeting filmmakers. I love talking about films. I love talking about impact. If I don't have an answer, I'm going to do my best to point you in a direction of an answer. So please do reach out. Also, if you want to bring Collective Lens, this very program, we have more modules. We do them in person, we do them virtually, and we love doing it with collectives of filmmakers. So reach out to me directly as well if you want to bring it to your community. Oh, I am seeing that there are some questions. And how do you see the potential for projects of social justice focus to break through within a capitalist system of entertainment that is generally designed to distract and numb? All right, I'm going to read that again because I don't think everyone heard me, and it's an amazing question. How do you see the potential for projects with social justice focus to break through within a capitalist system of entertainment that is generally designed to distract and numb? I can't give enough. I want to hug this question. I think about this stuff all the time. The system is stacked against us because we're talking about equity. We're talking about representation. We're talking about transformative change. I think how I see potential is that's why your goal should be specific. And that's why it's so important to be in tune with the grassroots work that's happening on the ground. There is incredible work that happens every day by organizers, and films are incredible tools for the set organizers. So on one point, I think we work on the grassroots level, we work on the ground, we support the folks that are doing the work, and change will happen. Our films will be successful tools for them. And within this capitalist system, absolutely agreed. I think the more we do this, the more we shift it. The more we work in a values forward way, the more we also shift it. And that's why that invitation to bring in your values, have them represented in your production, in your campaign. And it is tricky work, but the more we do it, the more slowly we shift and push and maybe sometimes shove this industry in a direction where we can have more inclusive and joyful experiences. I love this question very much. Sorry, that was a bit of a rant. Sorry, I apologize. I want to also point out that for those who attended today, we're going to be sharing our Collective Lens digital library. It has our distribution FAQ, it has our glossary, it has other tools in there, it has our impact reports for you to check out. And hopefully that will support your impact campaign plans. And finally, follow us on social media, join our newsletter. We have a bunch of cool stuff happening. We even are doing a focus group with documentary protagonists at the top of next year. So if you know of documentary protagonists who might want to participate, please reach out. And thank you. And I really appreciate that last question. Yes, it's a sad question, but also made me so happy to see it. So thank you so much. And I think with that, we're wrapped. Please stay.